G'day you mob, how's it going? I'm your host Pete and this is the Aussie English Podcast, the number one podcast for anyone and everyone wanting to learn Australian English. So guys, this is an interview episode and today I have the absolute pleasure of chatting with my dear friend Uyen Ha. So Uyen is of Vietnamese descent. She was born and raised Aussie. She's born and raised in Melbourne, Australia, just like me. However, her family came over here from Vietnam during and after the Vietnamese War. And so I thought I would love to share more of these stories of immigrant families in Australia, the kinds of history that they had, the stories they had, why they chose to come to Australia, how they did, what it was like, everything like that. And so I thought I'll talk to my friend Uyen, who I met when I was training jiu-jitsu back in Melbourne when I was doing my PhD. And also I wanted to include her because she has the incredible career of being a professional MMA fighter. So yeah, it's a really interesting interview, guys. I hope you get a lot out of it. I hope you enjoy it. And I won't hold you any longer. I give you Uyen Ha. G'day guys, welcome to this episode of Aussie English. Today I have my dear friend Uyen Ha. How are you going, Uyen?
I'm good. Everything's good. How are you?
I'm good. So I messaged you earlier this week begging you to come on the podcast. I guess we should talk a little bit about how we know each other. So to fill in the listeners, I used to train at Absolute MMA in the Melbourne CBD doing jiu-jitsu, and I remember I think you must have been in Jeremy's like teenager MMA class. Sorry?
Yeah. The Prodigies class.
That's right, the Prodigies class.
Yeah.
And was this in 2013, 2012?
Yeah, 2013. I started early 2013.
Far out. Yeah, so you were also...
It's been a long time.
Yeah, exactly. The career's come quite a way now, but I think we got to know each other because you started going into the jiu-jitsu classes as well and stuff once you finished high school, right? So you were 17, 18 at that time?
Yes, something like that. Yeah, so I started at Absolute when I was 16. And that was in 2013.
Yeah, so, I mean, I wanted to get you on because for those of you who can't see Uyen, she is of Vietnamese heritage, and there tend to be quite a large number of Vietnamese immigrants, although I wouldn't call you an immigrant, but your family, I assume, the same as I am, you know, that we've come from stock from overseas and they tend to have interesting stories, and I wanted to share yours because I'm sure it's interesting with the listeners. But before we get into that, how did you find yourself at 16 years old training MMA at an otherwise adult gym in the Melbourne CBD?
How did I come across Absolute, or how did I get into MMA?
Well, I guess both, and explain what MMA is, just for those who don't know the shortening.
All
there.
right. So MMA stands for Mixed Martial Arts, which is basically anything goes. It's its own sport now. You probably heard of the UFC. That's probably the premier promotion for mixed martial arts, but it includes kickboxing, boxing, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling. Those are the main kind of martial arts that form MMA.
And so how did you end up in doing that? Was that something that you'd wanted to do since you were, even younger kid, or did you just fall into it somehow? Someone roped you in?
I had always wanted to do some kind of combat sport or martial art. I was a bit of a movie buff, so growing up as a child, just watching action movies or, TV shows, like a lot of like Chinese kung fu movies with my grandmother.
Everyone used to watch those though, right? All the ones where they were dubbed really poorly.
Yeah.
And they were
I don't know. My grandma was into it. Yeah. So I was into it, and I was like, I always, wanted to be that badass. Like I wanted to, be able to beat someone up, like the bad guys, obviously. But I never acted on it. My mum was always like, oh, we should get you into karate or so-and-so. But I was always really shy. I was a shy teenager, as you would have known.
You came out of your shell eventually.
Yes, definitely. And I really thank MMA for that. But, in Australia is a very sporty country. So to get anywhere in sport, or all of the kids I went to school with, they had always started sports, footy or netball since they were like 4, 5, 6 years old. So kind of everyone had already gotten into their sport and were good at it. So I always thought I was too old for it. But little did I know that MMA was a very new sport. It'd only been around, for a decade, 2 decades before. So it was there was that niche, and I didn't know that I could get somewhere with it. So that I was always too shy for it. I had my auntie's partner, he did jiu-jitsu. And he was always like, you should do jiu-jitsu, you should try it. Every time I saw him, he was raving about it. He was like,
they become evangelists, right? Where they're like, you need to try this new thing. It's a drug.
No, I do that. You need to do that, But I was always like, no, I'm too, I never said it to him, but I said I felt too old. And then I tried out, I dabbled in all the school sports that were offered, and I enjoyed fitness, I enjoyed sports, but none of them were really my passion, right? So I never really went further with any of them. And then one day I quit guitar lessons, and then I was like, I should probably pick something else up. And I was like, maybe it's time for martial arts. So I literally Googled martial arts Melbourne, and I guess Absolute had a great web developer or something, because the first thing that came up was Absolute MMA. I think it probably still is the first one that comes up.
That's so funny you mentioned that, because that's how I found it. I was wanting to do something as well with my body, wanting to do some sort of sport when I was studying, and I was just like, I'll type in Jiu-Jitsu Melbourne, and that was the first thing to come up.
Someone has to be thanked for that. I don't know who it is, but it's done well. So I typed in martial arts Melbourne. I didn't know what kind of martial arts it was. Got onto Absolute MMA. I had no idea what MMA was at that time. Yeah. Probably didn't even know what it was. I genuinely didn't know what MMA was a year into training it. Genuinely. And then this one time I watched Warrior, and I was like, oh, that's the sport that I do. It's okay. So I signed up for a free trial class because I had the Prodigies class, which was for under 18-year-olds.
I think the biggest issue with setting that up was the fact that just the bulk of the people that were around tended to be adults, especially in the CBD, because there are no real high schools or anything nearby.
Sure. But there were a few of us, and we would all come from after school from all over Melbourne, just because that was probably at that time that was probably one of the only gyms that offered something like that, some kind of program.
How did it get set up? Did someone specifically have to try and ask, or they had a lot of offers from parents wanting their children to train, but they were just like, at the time, we don't have any child classes or underage classes. We don't want to make you fight adults.
It was already there, so that's how I got into it.
So what aspect of MMA really hooked you in? How did you get sucked in? And was it a long process, or did it happen overnight?
Oh, my first class was interesting. It was scary because I walked in, so if anyone who hasn't been to Absolute MMA in the city, it's a basement. You walk downstairs. It's very foreboding.
There's only one entrance and one exit.
Yeah, exactly. And I met Dan Herbertson at the counter, and he was very lovely. So he was like, I was like, okay, this is all right. And, I was a really shy person. So walking down those stairs into this completely new environment, I'd never been into a gym, let alone an MMA gym. And there was just all this gym equipment and just men, and boys. And the class was just full of teenage boys who were also very awkward with me because I was a female.
And something to mention too is, quite interestingly, a huge bulk of the people at the gym were of Asian descent, right? Because we had a lot of students from overseas, and they tended to be young women and young men from places like China, Singapore, Japan, Korea. Yeah. They seem to be drawn to the martial arts stuff. So
maybe it's part of our culture, I think, just that whole martial arts background, watching those movies as a kid. I feel like I've met a lot of Asian dads who, they're like, oh, you should do like this or this. And I'm like, yeah, okay. But everyone's really into it, It's just part of the culture, maybe.
Yeah, far out. And so was it the first class that got you, or once you got in there?
I was scary. Jeremy, the coach, he was very lovely, and, he took the time out to help me out. But I just felt like I was so out of place, and I just didn't, I don't know. At that point in time doing that class, I didn't know that I would be coming back. But afterwards, Jeremy was like, hey, there's a girl, you can talk to, and she will maybe she can help you out with any questions about being a female in the gym that, I can't answer those questions for you, but maybe she can help. And that was April.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
April
is one of my friends as well, who is a jiu-jitsu star.
She's come a long way in her jiu-jitsu career. At that point in time, she was just warming up for her next class, and she had only been training for a year.
Yeah.
And in that time, she had achieved so much, and she was the one who kept me there. Just that conversation, like she said, this place is great. Everyone's really friendly and welcoming, and it's a great environment. And I was like, okay, so having that, talking to someone who had the same experience as me as a female in a martial arts gym, it really helped me out with that.
She would have matched you in quite a few different ways too, right? Because she was of Philippine descent and but born and raised in Australia.
Yeah.
But she's also a freak athlete, where I think she had been doing competing in cycling for years and years, and so she could hold her own. She was strong. I remember that.
Definitely, yeah.
She choked me out a few times. But so that was a big part as well. That's sort of a barrier, and that's difficult with at the time at least. Like, you were a young woman who's going to a gym where it's mostly male dominated, older men as well.
Yeah.
And so a big thing I remember at that time, a big thing was always trying to get women to join up and to stay and to train with the other women, because they would enter the class and quite often be some of the smallest people.
100%.
Was that something that, turned away a lot of people, but then kept the people who really were, interested in facing adversity? Was that something that you had to sort of deal with?
I think being a female in an MMA gym and staying, you have to have something, because you're always going to be the minority in that group, in the whole MMA gym. You're always going to be looked at differently or seen differently, or maybe not taken seriously enough in terms of career. But yeah, so it really shows that you have to have that kind of extra something, but it's good, because whenever we have a new girl come to the gym, you always make an effort to make her welcome, because we all know what it feels like, especially if you've never done anything like that before.
Well, it's brutal, right? I remember going in, compared to you, obviously I'm quite a lot bigger, but I felt small in terms of compared to the other guys in the class, and have my ass handed to me, every single day. And for that to just be like, for me at least, it felt like more than 50% of the people I would fight were more experienced or larger or both. And so every single fight was pretty much, the majority of them were me getting my ass handed to me and just getting crushed.
Yeah.
It took a lot to overcome that and just be like, it's not about winning. It's about the journey. It's about fitness. It's about learning, and you just have to. Yeah. But obviously for you, did you find that ended up shaping you mentally and aside from physically, and also helping you come out of your shell?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, me, I'm a female, but I'm also quite a smaller female. So that is even harder, but it just means you have to work harder and put in more effort. And, I was ready for that challenge, because I had fallen in love with the sport. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, it was, you just have to do it.
So the good thing was, I remember though too, for women, and I was quite jealous, is that you guys tended to be able to get into really good, shape and then get into competitions a lot more easily, because people were dying. They're like, come on, we need more girls. We need to fill these weight divisions and everything. And I remember showing up to competitions, and you'd have 100 dudes, and just be like, there's no chance. I have to be, there's just no chance.
You have to be the best of the best. Yeah. And that's the advantage of it. Like I said, in other sports, especially in Australia, if you want to get somewhere with it, you have to start from when you're 5, 6 years old. And that'll be the same for MMA this generation or next generation. Exactly. But luckily I had started at the right time where I could get someone, because there was that niche. Like there was just no girls at that time doing it. So it was very easy to climb the ranks because of that. So,
who did we have at the time that was fighting? Would have been like Ronda Rousey, and that would have been about it, right?
Yeah. I mean, at the
big
highest
names.
level. Yes. Yeah. That's about it. Women's MMA wasn't even a thing. But now it is. But now I've got my foot in the door, so it's good. It's getting harder every day, and there's more competition nowadays. But having that gap, it's hard for training, but it's good for the career.
So how did you go? You ended up training there for, it would have been at least a good, I mean, I'm not sure if you still train there at the same gym.
Yeah.
I assume you do, maybe. But
Yes.
yeah, you ended up fighting in one, right?
One Warrior Series.
One Warrior Series. What was the journey from obviously, you know, starting as a teenager who knew nothing about MMA to ending up in, you know, one of these huge competitions?
Yeah. So I trained for 2 years at Absolute, and I saw Gemma Pike.
Yeah, another one of our friends, except she's a
exactly.
Muay Thai chick. She was a Muay Thai, not an MMA chick.
Yeah, she got sponsored at Sinbi Muay Thai in Thailand, which is a renowned Muay Thai gym, and I was like, that's the coolest thing ever. I was like, can you imagine living in Thailand as a sponsored fighter? And, you know, that just sounded like the dream to me. And at that point in time, I didn't want to finish high school because I was like, you know what, I just want to be a fighter. And everyone got involved. Jeremy got involved. The boys in the Prodigies class got involved. They're like, no, you got to finish. So I was like, okay. In my head, I said, I'm going to finish high school, but at the end of it, I'm going straight to Thailand for 3 months.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. So I finished high school, and a few weeks later, I flew off to Thailand for 3 months by myself, and it was the best experience of my life. I had such a good time. I trained at AKA Thailand, and I just did straight Muay Thai every day, twice a day, and it was an incredible experience. And then I went back to Australia, and life just wasn't the same.
You caught the bug.
Everyone always comes back. They go to Thailand, they always come back. But every time sorry, it's my dog.
two ears just appeared on the screen.
Yeah.
It's a French bulldog. That's why the ears were so visible.
Yeah, exactly. Every time, I don't even lost my train of thought.
So you were in Thailand. You came back to Australia.
Yeah, it wasn't the same. Had to go straight into college. Had to straight back to Melbourne. 3 days later, I had to move to Canberra for university into college, and going from an environment where it was just fighters living their best life to 18-year-old college life. I mean, that sounds fun for some, but it wasn't for me. I was like, I hate this place. This place is not me. You know, I belong in Thailand. So I did my best. I was sneaking to Melbourne and between Melbourne and Canberra back and forth so I could get in my training. And then I received an offer of sponsorship at AKA Thailand. And so I moved to Thailand within a week's notice of sponsorship. I was like, this is my chance. I have to take this. I have to do it.
They were like, win, we've got this opportunity. Done.
Yeah,
done.
No, literally. Because the manager at that gym messaged me one night, and he was like, when are you coming back to Thailand? I said, when you sponsor me. And he's like, okay, cool. And I was like, wait, what?
See you tomorrow.
And he expected me to take a few months or whatever. I literally came the next week. I was like, if I get I got this opportunity, I'm going now. And, and that's, I'm very impulsive like that, which is why I started MMA, because I quit guitar lessons. So I was like, I'm just going to start MMA.
And what's life like in Thailand for those? Because that's something I've seen quite a bit. Obviously, being in an MMA gym, there's a big portion of that which is the Thai fighting, and a lot of them end up going to places like Thailand to train full on in the tropics. What was the process like there? Like, is it like a 9-to-5 job? What's it like?
So it's morning and night training. So let's say morning from 7:30 to 9:30, for example, or 7:30 to 10, and then you have lunch, go home, have a nap, and then come back at, let's say 4 to 6 p.m. And that's the kind of the Muay Thai aspect of the training. But then when I came back, I was doing MMA training. So I was part of the MMA team. And that was kind of the same, morning training, night training. And you just kind of live that life, and everything's really close. There's not really any commute. But the thing is, there's no other distraction. Everyone else is on the same page as you. Everyone else is a fighter. So it's not like, in Melbourne, I get so distracted because I had a job. I had friends who wanted to do this on that night, and just friends from all different, different friendship groups. But
it's weird how you become a bit of a hermit, right? in the
Yeah.
MMA community, because you kind of see, you socialize like crazy when you're at the gym. You're like, man, I hang out with like 100 people every day for hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, that's enough.
And that's it. You go home and everyone's like, come out. And you're like, man, my body is so sore. I can't do anything. I'm sleeping.
And when you're putting your body through that much stress and training, you really need that downtime. And, it's so important. There's just the last thing you need to do is go out and, socialize.
How do they structure it though? So if you're doing that, are you doing it every single day from morning and night?
Yes, Monday to Saturday. So
Holy
Sunday
moly.
is rest day. So that's for Muay Thai.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then MMA was Monday to Friday, and then Saturday was like, kind of fitness day.
Far out. So you were doing both at the same time, these different training sessions?
I was doing a bit of both, and then eventually I was just doing the MMA.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So how did you end up then in one? How does the story continue from here?
Yeah, so just being at that gym, there were always like people scouting and all that sort. And I ended up moving to Tiger Muay Thai. I switched gyms, moved to Tiger Muay Thai, which is a world-renowned MMA gym. A lot of UFC guys have come out of it. We have a fantastic team. And I had been in contact with a promoter for One Championship for a while, but I hadn't had any MMA fights. I didn't have any experience. So they offered me to come down to the tryouts for the One Warrior Series tryouts for the first season. And I went to Bangkok and tried out and wasn't accepted. I said, let's get you a little bit more experience and we'll see, but we're definitely interested in you. And the girl that did get signed was Stamp Fairtex, who is now the one championship atom weight champion in Muay Thai and kickboxing. She has 2 titles.
Far out.
I ended up having an amateur MMA fight with her. I lost by decision, and then I had another amateur MMA fight, and then they called me up, and then they said, okay, we think you're ready. You've had the experience, so that was it. They came to Phuket. We did the filming. We filmed the show, and I've been signed with them since then.
So how many fights have you had in the meantime? Like, I'm sure a lot of people see the UFC and One and these other fighting championships with MMA fighters, but they don't really understand how often how infrequent fights actually take place, right?
Yeah,
the majority of your time is training, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, so I've only fought 3 times. I had 3 pro MMA fights with a 2-1 record. And I've had quite big breaks in between them. And especially now with the COVID situation, we're not really sure when the next one might be. But yeah, I mean, even a really active MMA fighter, if he can get like 4 or 5 fights in a year, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And that, what would that be like? Once every 2 months, once every 3 months?
And that would probably be assuming that he won a few of them too, right?
Yeah,
so that he didn't have to recover from...
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's quite an active fighter. Unlike Muay Thai, where they'll fight, twice a month and still train and not recover.
Well, that stuff in Thailand is crazy, right? Isn't it? Some of them fight every single week.
That's their livelihood. That's just... But also they've been doing it since they were 5. It's nothing new to them. It's not, for us, that'd be crazy. And
the other thing is it's the only way for them to put bread on the table, right? So they're
that's how they work. It's, it's like anyone else going to their job. It's them going into the ring, having a fight,
So looking back on when you were trying to decide whether or not to finish school, and to whether or not you decided what to do with school, you wanted to still become an MMA fighter as a career. How do you see those choices that you've made? Are you happy about them? And that's not a criticism. That's not.
No. I mean, I don't really look at things in the way, what should I have done in that kind of sense. But, I did what I did. I finished high school. I went to uni. I'm still in uni. I'm still doing it. If I hadn't found fighting, what I study is what I would be studying anyway, which I really enjoy.
Because my point is it would have been such a leap of faith, right? Like
100%. And that's what I was kind of willing to do because I loved it so much. But, you never really know obviously in a sport if you're going to get injured or what happens if something like that happens, especially in such a dangerous sport like MMA where brain injuries are very common. So yeah, it's hard to tell.
Have you been knocked out yet?
I have. My last fight, I got knocked out.
Brutal. Can you
First
explain the
fight,
process? What was that like?
it was, well, I've never, been dropped at sparring or anything before. I don't even remember it happening. I remember waking up and my head was through the ropes.
Yeah.
It was just kind of hazy, and I was like, oh, okay. And they got me. They were like, can you get up for the decision? And I was like, no, I can't.
I can't imagine.
Put me in a wheelchair, wheeled me out. It was the most humiliating thing ever. I was like through the audience, like, but no, it was. I don't remember it happening. I just remember everything, and that was it. I didn't even really have a concussion afterwards either, like the next few days. So
oh, good. Okay, so you didn't have like the full on. Like I had one of my friends. I think. Sorry, it broke up there. What did you say?
No, you go.
I had a friend when he was a teenager. He was a footballer, and he got knocked out one day just from being hip and shouldered. I think, and he couldn't taste properly, and he was like seeing things straight like for about a week or so after the process, and so it was just a nightmare. But yeah, well, that's good then. Yeah, hopefully, if you didn't come out of it with too bad a concussion.
Pretty good. And they usually say that if you get knocked out, it's much better for the brain than having a huge 3-round fight with both guys just going back and forth. Like it's a lot less damage if you just
Well, that's the long-term thing, right? So that can be the danger with MMA. If you get lots of small hits, you don't necessarily need to be knocked out, but if you're getting hit all the time.
Yeah, with hard punches that sting you but don't necessarily, rock you. Yeah.
So did that turn you off it, or are you just like, it's still worth it?
So right after, I was not a happy camper. I was like, why did I put myself through that? That was awful. I absolutely hated that. I was like, I'm quitting. I'm retiring, which is very dramatic, considering I've only had 3 fights. But then the next day I was like, okay, cool. No one really cares. Whatever, just keep going, redeem yourself.
So what is it that drives you as someone who wants to fight professionally? And, can you describe what it is that drives you to want to put your life on the line effectively for entertainment? Because
I enjoy competing and fighting in MMA because it's like the ultimate challenge. It's like an ultimate physical challenge and mental challenge. And I really like, pushing myself and seeing how far I can go in a fight and in a career, because I've gotten to a point where I've been doing this for a while and I really enjoy it. So for me, it's something that I really enjoy doing. I enjoy the people that I've met along the way, and I love training and I love the lifestyle. So it's just natural to keep competing.
Awesome. So how did your family react? Because I'm sure initially they would have been thinking, yeah, she wants to train martial arts, karate's fine. It tends to be non-contact usually, and that she'll get fit. Maybe she'll get over it. It'll be a phase. What was that process like?
Yeah, so when I first started, I told my mum that I was doing martial arts. And there's a lot of different kinds of martial arts. But MMA is probably the most violent because it's the most effective martial arts put together for violence, pretty much.
And why is that, just quickly?
Because it's like a competitive sport. It's not for show. It's not for points. It's, whoever can beat the other guy. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, my mum thought I was doing martial arts. She had no idea what that meant. Probably like Aikido or something like that.
Something safer.
And it wasn't until, I had no idea what MMA was anyway. It wasn't until she found out that I was doing mixed martial arts or cage fighting, because my uncle came down from Queensland for a family dinner, and he said, oh, you do mixed martial arts, so like cage fighting. And my mum's face just, the drive home, she was like, you do cage fighting? And I was like, yeah. And, it was tough because, coming from a Vietnamese background, you don't do those things. You have to be a model student kind of thing. But, I said, I'm just training, I'm not fighting. And she was like, okay, that's fine. She got more used to it. And it wasn't until I started like doing better and getting awards and doing jiu-jitsu and wrestling that she kind of recognized it more. And, you know, when I said I was going to go to Thailand, she was like, that's fine. Thinking it was just a phase, of course, but it was more than a phase because I'm still doing it.
Wynn was getting deeper and deeper into the grips of MMA.
Yeah, exactly.
Far out. So what was it like? Let's get on to your family. Can you tell me a little bit about the history of your family and how they ended up in Australia?
Yeah, so both of my parents came over during the Vietnam War to Australia as refugees. My mum came with her whole family. She was around 12 or 13, and she came by boat with her parents and all the siblings. She was the second oldest. And my father, he came, I think, just after the war at around 22, and it was just him and his older sister because his family couldn't afford to send all of them. But at that point in time, when the northern Vietnamese troops took over, it was that no one would be able to go to university. So that's when my father's side, they freaked out and said, okay, we have to send, you know, the brightest we have to send what we can over so that they can get an education in Australia.
I can't imagine having to make that choice, like having just had my son, Noah, and I can't imagine, Australia getting into a situation like that where, you know, because I'm sure your parents were growing up in a country where their parents probably didn't think it was going to end up with them sending their children overseas, but then two, having to decide which members of the family.
Having to pick and choose, like, because, you know, they had 5 kids and they could only afford to send 2. So
yeah, but it's a good story, I think, too, because it seems like the Vietnamese community has had a lot of success as a result of coming to Australia, right?
Yes, certainly.
So what made them decide where they were going in terms of Australia as a country? Because obviously they would have had many other options.
Yeah, I don't think they could decide from what I've heard. It was more that they both got on a boat and then you were sent to a processing center, which was an island in Malaysia. And I think there were a few islands that they were sent to. Yep. And they stayed there for about a year. I think my mother was there for a year, which apparently is quite short. Like being there for a year, everyone was like, wow, you know, you had it lucky. Before they were actually sent off to a country. So we had family members going to America, to Germany, to France, and, you know, Australia. And when they found out that they were going to Australia, if you found out you're going to Australia, you were very lucky. Because not only was it closer, but because Australia was a respected nation in South Vietnam at the time. So just with their the way their troops conducted themselves. So they were very lucky to have come to Australia, very happy to come to Australia.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. I remember being driven to school every single day, and the guy on the bus that was driving the bus was a Vietnam vet.
Oh, right.
And you were just like, you know,
wow.
I mean, at my time, when I was a kid, obviously I knew very little about, you know, the war and migration and everything like that. But yeah. So when they got here, they obviously both ended up in Melbourne, I take it.
Yes.
Can you describe what life's like in Melbourne as someone from Vietnam, I guess, growing up there as well, because there's quite a tight-knit community, right?
Yeah. So I'm not 100% sure, but I do know that first they had kind of like foster families that would kind of help them out with settling in to Australia. You know, they were enrolled in school, they were taught English, and there were a lot of organizations that helped the transition from, you know, their life to an Australian life. And my father had to work in factories because he came when he was older, in his early 20s. So he spent a lot of time in the factories working, or like out in the farms. They would send them out to farms to kind of earn their money.
Far out. And so did your parents have any background learning the language, or was that just something they had to dive into once they realised they were coming to Australia?
Yeah, they dove into it. My dad spoke a tiny bit of French.
Of course, because you guys
when he was in Vietnam.
Vietnam was colonised by the French, right?
but that was about it. They didn't speak any English, and they learned that when they got there. And my mum was sent straight into year 11, and her sister was sent straight into year 12, and they didn't even know how to speak English.
So do they speak with an accent today, or did they lose
do.
it?
So their English is good.
Yeah.
They understand everything, but there is an accent. Yeah.
Yeah.
And my mum. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
No, you go.
My mum is a university lecturer now, so she obviously teaches in English, but she does have a little accent, which is, it's not a typical Vietnamese accent, but there's definitely something.
And have they held on to their dialect of Vietnamese that they spoke when they came to Australia?
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting because the Vietnamese that I learn is their kind of Vietnamese, which was the Vietnamese in the 80s or the late 70s. So if I've been to Vietnam quite a few times since then, and when I have been back, I don't actually understand because the language has changed. So I know their Vietnamese. I understand everything that they say in the way that all the Vietnamese Australians speak in Vietnamese. But when I go to Vietnam, it's completely different. There's all this slang. It's a new kind of vocabulary.
That's so funny, isn't it? How it kind of splits up the language into dialects.
Yeah.
Well, because it's the same sort of thing, I think, on Lygon Street in Melbourne, where you've got a huge Italian community. But apparently, whenever I meet Italians who've just come to Australia and they go there, they're like, these guys are speaking another language. This is totally different. Yeah,
exactly. So it's exactly the same thing. It's just the way it's a little evolution of language.
So what was it like growing up the daughter of an immigrant family and going to school?
Yeah, so I guess it was pretty easy. My mum was a single mum because my parents divorced early on. So she was working full time, doing her PhD, and I was put into the university creche since I was like 3 months old. So I learned English the same time as I had learned Vietnamese, and there were mixed race children and a lot of white children.
Yep.
So very multicultural. And then when I went to primary school, there was, probably like 5-10% were Asian and the rest were white, because we moved to kind of a middle class, very like white suburban area in Melbourne. And that was the same for when I went to high school. It was pretty much all white, 10% Asian or so. But it was different. The culture was different. I would bring I'm sure a lot of children of immigrant parents have this experience, all the other kids would bring in sandwiches and you would have this stinky rice dish or something, and all the kids would be like, ew, that's gross or whatever. But I knew my food was the tastiest.
It wasn't just whatever it was, tip top white bread with some Vegemite between it.
Go away with your fairy bread. I've got Vietnamese curry here.
Yeah, far. Well, that's what I always wonder, because we have a lot of stereotypes like that, right?
Yeah.
Where you see movies like Wog Boy, and they emphasize that they were treated very differently growing up, and that they had, quote unquote, weird food and weird clothing.
Yeah.
And that's why I thought it would be interesting to hear your side of the story, because you're someone who's lived it. And was it as bad as it tends to be made out to be in sort of pop culture like that? Or was it different?
I personally had I never experienced any racism where I was. I know people who did. I never felt it. There was nothing ever said to my face that was kind of like that. But just, little differences and understanding, because obviously my family wasn't a Christian family, just things like, celebrating Christmas wasn't really a thing. It was just differences like that. But I came to understand that, it wasn't going to be the same. It wasn't going to be the same situation. And that was okay.
So did you feel yourself rebelling, whether against your family and their culture or against, quote unquote, white Australian culture? Or did you feel like you could take on both of them comfortably?
I thought I could take on both of them comfortably because, to be fair, my mum is very westernized. She's been in the country since she was 12, so very young, and she what's the word? Acclimatized?
Acclimated.
Acclimate, that's the one. She acclimated to the culture very easily, and she's really proud of coming to Australia, and she loves Australia, so she loves Australian culture. So it's very easy for us because we you celebrated the great things about Vietnamese culture, but you also had it in a very Australian kind of way, an Australian upbringing. So it wasn't too much of a difference, and it wasn't in conflict of anything.
So do you feel like you have obviously almost the best of both worlds then, and that you have this really rich cultural background because you have this strong tie with a different country like Vietnam, but you also have been born and raised and shaped by Australian culture?
Yeah, definitely. Like I'm glad, that my parents came to Australia and I had a great upbringing that was safe, and I, was able to get a great education. But I'm also, very proud of my Vietnamese heritage and, speaking the language and having Vietnamese culture and Vietnamese holidays, which are, so amazing. So, I'm pretty lucky about that. I know I have a lot of friends, white Australian friends who are, say, I wish I spoke another language or something like that.
Yep.
So I'm lucky that I do have that.
Was that something you had to fight for? Because I know that there are a lot of the children of first generation immigrants who've come to Australia who end up forgetting the language, or, their parents don't push hard enough. One of my friends at school had a father who was Italian and a mother who was Filipino, and neither of them learnt each other's languages,
right?
And so only spoke English in the house, and so he never learnt either one of the other languages.
Yeah.
So was there sort of pressure for you to learn Vietnamese?
Well, I could speak Vietnamese because my grandma couldn't speak English, and for my first 5 years, I lived with my grandma, so my Vietnamese speaking skills are quite good. My writing skills and my reading skills aren't that great, but my dad pushed me a lot to learn Vietnamese because my dad is very, very proud of his Vietnamese heritage. And I used to hate doing the Vietnamese classes, and I used to cry, and then my mum used to have to save me, and she'd be like, okay, let's stop here right now. Let's not do these lessons. But
are you glad you did, I take it?
I'm glad I did. I mean, I know enough to hold a conversation. I'm not completely fluent in it, but I'm glad I can speak the language, and, that's all right for me.
So what about your identity? Like, do you see yourself as Vietnamese, as Australian, as a combination of the two? And if someone were to say, which country are you from, is that an easy question to answer or a difficult question to answer?
I always say I'm from Australia because I was born in Australia and I was raised in Australia, and I grew up all around Australians, like as in white Australians, I should say. But obviously I do have that Vietnamese culture in me that I grew up with, especially with my grandma. But for the most part, I lived in a very westernized household with my mum. So I would definitely say I'm Australian, especially when I was living overseas. When people ask where you're from, I would say I'm Australian, but my parents are Vietnamese.
Yeah, it's such an interesting sort of situation to be in, because I imagine obviously to a lesser extent, my family would have had that same sort of experience when they first came over here in the 1850s from Great Britain, and they would have arrived with all these other quote unquote Australians that had been here, that had migrated here from other countries, Germany and Great Britain and everything, in the last 70 years, and they would have felt like the fresh off the boat
right
people. But it's always weird when I think about the fact that I'm genetically from Western Europe. Like, I'm from England, I'm from Scotland, I'm from, the area around Germany, at least genetically, but I've never been there.
Yeah,
and so I have this pull that I feel like I really want to go there and see the place that my ancestors, were born and raised. What was it like for you the first time you went back to Vietnam?
Yeah. So I was just thinking about that. Like, for me, I would identify as Australian because that's the environment that I was brought up in. But I would never say that I'm Vietnamese. But when I did go back to Vietnam, there was that connection that, this is where my parents were born. This is where my whole family and my lineage is from. This is my country. And it wasn't until I went to Vietnam for the first time, I would have been, maybe like 15 or so, 15, 16, that I really felt a connection with it. And since then, I've embraced more of my Vietnamese culture after actually going there.
Was it hard to dive in? Once you went back to Vietnam, how did the people there treat you? Do they see you as a foreigner? Or do they see you as one of them?
Yeah, They kind of saw me as a foreigner because I dressed differently and I didn't speak in the same way as they did. But my family, my extended family, who I'd never met before, they're very, it's a very tight knit kind of circle. So they were always welcoming of me. They ask how I am every day since I was born, kind of thing. So they know everything about me. So they were very welcoming of it.
Yeah, because I wonder what it's going to be like with Noah, my son, because my wife's Brazilian and he hasn't met half his family who don't speak English, and that's why we're trying to raise him with as much Portuguese as possible so we can communicate with him. But I don't know where he's going to feel like he fits in, in terms of, are you Australian, are you Brazilian? And then when we did my wife's genetic test recently, we found out she's like 12% African, 10% Indigenous American, and then the rest is like different parts of Europe from Scotland to Spain and Portugal. And so it is one of those weird things where you're like...
changes the way you see yourself kind of thing. Like,
yeah, exactly. And so it is really funny. But well... we can probably finish up there because I've sort of just thrown a lot of questions at you, but I really appreciate you coming on, Win, and sort of being so candid and telling us your story, because it is such an interesting one. And I think, how do you, I guess, to finish up, feel about Australia as a country? And, is it something that you're proud of? Is it something that you're worried about? Do you think it's only going to go up or down in the future? Where do you see things heading?
Well, for me personally, I've always been proud to have grown up, and been born in Australia, just because of the way my family has respected Australia. Ever since they found they were coming here, they've always, been very grateful of it, especially my father. But more growing up, so, I'm happy to be from this country, especially now during this pandemic. But in terms of refugee stuff, my parents were refugees, so just Australia's track record in the last decade with refugees hasn't been fantastic. And I study international relations and I minor in human rights, so I'm very big on that, especially knowing that could have been me. That could have been my parents, drowning in the ocean or getting sent back. Maybe, what kind of life would I have had if they hadn't been accepted into Australia, if they hadn't had an open kind of borders policy in that time. So I think about that a lot. In that kind of sense, I'm not too proud of Australia with their refugee intake kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a rock and a hard place, I think, a lot of the time, especially with the boat people coming across from Indonesia and the people trafficking them. It's like, oh my God, I'm so glad I don't have to make decisions about that.
Yeah, and it's tough. It's really tough.
Awesome, Win. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And before we finish up, how can people find out more about you and your career as an MMA fighter?
They can follow me on Instagram. It's at Win MMA, so that's spelled UYEN MMA, or I have a website which is winha.com, UYENHA.com.
Awesome. Well, I'll be sure to share the links with them. But thank you so much for coming on again. I really appreciated it.
Thank you so much for having me.